Hi, how you doing? Welcome back. Today we're looking at the GH5's natural profile and trying to come up with a correction for that to help you along the way with grading it. I'm sharing with you a LUT I've been working on to achieve that. Two disclosures at this stage. First of all, I'm not a colorist by profession. I'm just simply using my opinion based on using this camera over 2 years and looking at the footage shot from various different lighting conditions. And I've developed that LUT using that footage along with a color chart as well to try and be objective about it. Secondly, these natural settings come from the White In Revery YouTube channel. Now, they got their hands on a GH5 really early doors and they were putting out some really good looking footage, so do check them out if you want to see some. Now, I don't use the natural profile a lot myself, but when I do want that compromise of something that looks good straight out of camera and the flatter cine-d stuff, I do use the White In Revery settings. And just as they go on to grade that in post and use extra LUTs on top, I thought it was a way to get a little more latitude in post without using the straight up standard. So in my GH5 course, I went on to recommend those settings as what I used in the natural profile. But honestly, it does still need a little bit of work in post, I think, to look more neutral. For example, as you saw, these settings keep the contrast really low in order to give that little bit more flexibility and maybe a touch more dynamic range in post. But what I have found is that when I do that, I do see some noise in the shadows because obviously the camera is trying to artificially lift those. Now that should square away with some contrast added in post, but it's just an example of how you still need to look at what you've shot with this profile in order to get it looking as good as you want. If you wanted something to look good straight out of camera with virtually no processing at all, I'd recommend either the standard profile or maybe even natural. But in both cases, I would kill the noise reduction and sharpness as well. And out of the camera you should have something that looks pretty good. Natural I find needs a bit more contrast added and maybe some saturation in post, but that's really quick. But this LUT that I'm about to give away is designed for the settings I gave earlier, which in theory should have a little more latitude in post than natural straight out of the box. As you saw in the settings, saturation was brought down as well, obviously with the intention of bringing that up later in post. But interestingly, hue was also shifted to -1. So you should bear in mind the settings that you've shot with when it comes to the post process. So if you did want a sharper look, you could add some sharpness back to it. Or if you had some noise, you could use your own noise reduction software like Neat Video or Final Cut Pro's inbuilt software to actually kill a bit of the noise because you didn't do any of that in camera. We've taken away the saturation as well in camera, so you'd need to add that back. And also we've got that hue shift, which I think needs a bit more exploration. So where I do think this profile works straight out of camera and looks good immediately is when you've got a subject in some bright sunshine, maybe some greenery, and you're looking for that warm look. So you can totally see why wedding filmmakers like the White In Revery guys would land on settings like these. That said, they do go on to use other LUTs on top of that from what I've seen. So that was a nice warm sunny feel, but what about every other scenario that you might be shooting in? Well, that's where I think this profile might be a bit limited. Between the reduced contrast and the hue shift, I'm seeing like a yellow haze over a lot of my footage, which I'm not happy with. So here are some examples, and what I would say is you might not be able to tell straight away what the issue is until it's been corrected. But in this example here, I'll just pause that. This part here of the ladder is supposed to be red, and obviously it is far from it. It's an orangey colour at the moment. And here you might be able to see there's just a general yellow haze, and it'll become more apparent later, as I say. But to me, it's evident in the wood, in the roof there, and the bricks, and obviously their faces. We'll see what happens when it's corrected, but it looks like a yellow haze has been lifted once we'll sort that out. Now obviously if you're going to add a grade on top of your natural profile, this yellowness, especially in the skin tones, will carry through obviously into the LUTs, which is why I think it needs correcting. So if we see the original footage there, and then here with a LUT attached, you can see how yellow the skin is relative to everything else. I just don't think that's a good look at all, and yes, I've been quite aggressive with the LUT, I've added it in full, but at the same time, it could look better than this straight out of the box. So I used a bunch of my footage and some color chart tests, and I developed a LUT which I think helps correct the natural profile to give you a more neutral image. Just like the last video I did on the cine-d profile, this will be a free LUT with a link in the usual place. So So I think this look brings the colours to a more neutral baseline and it kills that yellow bias that we were just looking at. So here's a few before and afters. And if we go back to this red ladder, this is the original shot here on the top layer, and underneath we've got the natural footage with my corrective LUT on it. So here on top we've just got a white balance and my LUT is not active. And you can see the ladder there is orange. So if I disable that, underneath we've got the same again but with my LUT on, and voila, the ladder is now red. Going back to this shot of the couple interview we've got here, where I said I could see a yellow haze across it. You can see this is the before shot straight out of camera with a small white balance adjustment there. If we take that off and show you what's underneath with my corrective LUT applied, we can see the yellowness from all the bricks and all the woodwork has really been toned down, and it looks like a much more balanced shot. Here's another before and after shot. So this interview was actually done with daylight acting as the key light, and we've got a bounce from above from one of the indoor house lights. There's the original out of camera shot without my LUT applied, and there it is with the LUT applied. Now if that was too much for you and actually you wanted more saturation or yellowness in the skin back, you could always dial back the intensity of the LUT. That can be done in Final Cut as well as Premiere Pro. In Premiere Pro you might have to apply the LUT as a creative look in this case, and then you can dial back the intensity. But in Final Cut Pro it's just this mix slider here. And you could come up with a halfway house, for example, between my corrected LUT and the original straight out of camera, and you know, you've got what I see as an improvement there still. Let's go back to that earlier clip where I said the yellowness in the skin tones that you get out of the natural profile with this profile setting is then carried forward through in your creative look, and in my view is a bit yucky. Here is that gentleman again. So we applied this LUT here, and I said how this skin was a bit too yellow, and it wasn't working for me. So if we apply our corrective LUT beforehand, to me that is a much more of a subtle natural look. The creative look is benefiting from this correction in my view. And again, if this is the look that you were going for, you could play around with these sliders and get something approaching more of a natural grade to your natural profile. But what if you wanted just a balanced look out of the camera and you didn't want to do any further grading? Well, for that reason, I'm giving you a second LUT in the package, which adds in a nice contrast curve, gives you some more saturation that the profile took out in the first place, to hopefully give you a one-click solution to a nice rounded Rec 709 image from that natural profile. So within the folder that you download, you'll get the two LUTs and also a PDF giving you a bit of an explanation about what the LUTs are doing and also how to use them. So let's just go through that little how to use process right now. As with the cine-d process given in the other video, the first step will be to correct the black point and our highlights. So looking at the waveform here for this one, I can see the shadows go down to about 1, which is very low, and the highlights up to about 88. Now given we've got some direct sunlight and some sky, I might be tempted to increase these highlights a little bit, which should also hopefully help this area here, which is very, very dark. So obviously this corresponds to this part of the image here. So in the first correction, first step, I've increased the highlights, and that has helped bring up the shadows a little bit because there's such an overlap, and it's made the whole image a bit brighter. Step 2 is to look at your white balance. Now ordinarily you try and shoot with a grey card hopefully, and you can refer to that and white balance from the grey card, and that'll give you the best result. In the absence of a grey card, you're looking for something grey in your scene or something that will be spectrally neutral. Let's say for example in this case we wanted to use the white of the boat. We could add the draw mask effect, draw around the white area to isolate that, and have a look at the vector scope. You can see here that it's kind of on the yellow warm side, so imagine what I did here was cool it down. Yep. We can see I brought the temperature slider down to bring this to a more central position, maybe about there. So that now is a balanced white bit at the bottom of the boat. Step 3 is to add the LUT. On Final Cut, that means going to the Effects, the Color tab, and adding Custom LUT, and then just picking the LUT from this drop-down menu. So there's the before and there's the after. As always with LUTs, you can look at adjusting the intensity. You can then review your saturation and your contrast from there. And if you do too much on those fronts, then you might want to reassess your white balance and make sure you're still happy with that. So that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.